This Parsha podcast is dedicated in honor of a new, precious, and preemie baby, our niece, Meira Prupus, née Wolbe, daughter of Rabbi Aryeh Wolbe. She had a baby boy over Shabbos. Now, this baby was born very early, much earlier than anticipated. I learned a new term, a micro-preemie, which means very, very premature, 1 pound and 8 ounces. So he's in the NICU in Jerusalem. And we want to, of course, celebrate and please God that this young boy will grow up big and strong. And in fact, our nephew, Shimon Prupus, he's like 6'2", 6'3". So we're talking about how like this kid starts off so small, but please God, he'll grow and be very, very big in every sense of the word. But the baby needs our prayers. Now, given that the baby has not been circumcised, obviously, the child has no first name that we know of. And in fact, in that instance, you pray for the Tinok, which means the child, Tinok ben Meira. Tinok, the child, the baby, newborn baby, son of Meira. And we want to wish a hearty mazel tov, of course, to the parents, to the grandparents, to the extended family, to the extended Torch family, of course. And importantly, this means that Rabbi Aryeh is now a grandfather. So we all have to treat him with respect. And we're toying maybe to buy him a nice grandfatherly cardigan. And we all agree we can't bust his chops anymore. He's deserving of respect from now on. But in all seriousness, include the baby Tinok ben Meira in your prayers, and may the young boy become big and healthy and strong. And please God, we'll have a bris, we'll have a circumcision in a few months. But to get out of the woods and please God, flourish and be a beacon of light for the family and for the entire nation. We have yet another double parsha, Acharei Mos and Kedoshim, and the subject matter of both of our parshos is lots and lots of mitzvos, all sorts of mitzvos, all sorts of laws. Our Zaytis tells us that these laws were enumerated during the Hakel convention every 7 years. Our nation got together for a convention. And what did they study? What did they learn? What did they read? This Parsha Kedoshim. Why? Because the majority of the laws of the Torah are here. Now, we did the math in previous years. It's not actually the majority, and that's an old question, but certainly the main body of both Parshios, Acharei Mos and Kedoshim, it's all sorts of mitzvos. And today I want to do something a bit different. I want to study not the body of the Parsha, but the bookends of the Parsha. And I want to suggest that this is a tale of two Parshas. Let's start with Acharei Mos. After the death of the sons of Aaron, they entered the Holy of Holies, and they were not invited. They were not supposed to go there. And Aaron is warned not to enter the Holy of Holies at any time. There's a very specific formula, a protocol that he must follow before he enters, all the specific sacrifices. And of course, we know it's only done once a year on Yom Kippur. So the parsha begins with the Yom Kippur service done by the high priest in the Holy of Holies. And this is a description of a human, of a priest, of a high priest, of a Kohen Gadol, entering the most inner sanctums of the temple of the tabernacle. Only one person, only one day a year goes into the Holy of Holies. And when you go into the Holy of Holies, when the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies, it's not a sightseeing tour. They're entering a completely different dimension, an angelic dimension, a supernatural dimension, an otherworldly dimension. They're going into a place that's more heaven than earth. It's a place where all the rules, all the confines and strictures of our world simply do not apply. It's a place where the Ark of the Covenant is housed, where the tablets of the covenant, etched by the finger of God, both sets of tablets, where they were housed. It's a place that there's just ever-present miracles. We mentioned this in the past. If you were to measure from one end of the ark to the wall, other end of the ark to the wall, the total space equals the entire space of the Holy of Holies, meaning that the ark doesn't take up any space. It's a fairly large vessel, and it doesn't take up any space. And that ark, of course, lifts those who lift it. It's a miraculous thing. And the high priest who's entering the Holy of Holies, he's transcending into a different dimension. What happens outside of the Holy of Holies does not govern at all what happens inside of it. As we know, there was a point in time in our history where prophecy went extinct. We've talked about this some time ago. At the beginning of the Second Temple era, the nation was led by a group of sages known as the Men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesses Hagedola, and that period coincided with the end of prophecy. And with the end of prophecy came the end of idolatry, and came, as we shall see, the end of a desire for incest. We've told this story before. We'll tell it again. It describes the earth-shattering tectonic shift that happened at the beginning of the Second Temple era. The prophecy and the prophets are going extinct. And there's a severe imbalance because on one hand we have the drive and the desire, the passionate yearning for idolatry, and it's not counterbalanced by a direct line to God, and that asymmetry had to be balanced out. And we told the story in the past. Talmud tells us that the men of the Great Assembly, they started praying, and they called out, cried out to God. This idolatry is the bane of our existence. This is what led to the destruction of the temple. This is what led to the burning of the sanctuary. This is what led to the death of the righteous. This is what led to the exile of Israel from their land. It did so much damage, and it's still here. And it's teasing us and dancing amongst us. They tell God, why did you give us this desire for idolatry? It's only for our benefit, for our reward. We don't want it. We don't want it, and we don't want its reward. So they're making a petition to heaven. We don't want idolatry anymore. And they sat, and they prayed, and they fasted for 3 days. After 3 days, God signaled his acquiescence. And a note floated down from heaven with one word on it, comprised of 3 letters. The word is emes, or emet, truth. The signet of God agreed to their plan. This marks the end of idolatry, but also the end of prophecy. There were prophets there, but with the end of idolatry comes the end of prophecy as well. And therefore, if God's going to signal his acceptance of the nation's terms, no longer is there prophecy. And the Talmud describes what the desire for idolatry looked like and what they did with it, how they bottled it up. It wasn't so simple. And then they figure, we're on a roll. We're on a roll. Let's get rid of some of the other things that are causing us so much trouble. Let's get rid of that pesky desire for immorality. That causes all sorts of sins of its own. We'll get rid of that, and then we'll really be righteous and elevated and holy. And again they prayed, and again it was delivered to them. And they held this desire for immorality. They detained it for 3 days. And then after 3 days, someone needed a freshly laid egg to give to a sick person, but even the animals had stopped procreating. And they realized, you know what? This is a bad idea. To eliminate this desire completely, the world needs it for its continuity. So they decided not to eliminate this desire, but to blind it. And they blinded the desire for evil inclination, the evil inclination, the desire for immorality, and that helped the people no longer desired their relatives, their sisters, their mothers. People ceased to covet close relatives. And today we know, unless someone is so deeply steeped in immorality, they will not desire. It's not natural to desire for a man to be very high testosterone and all that. Not going to desire sisters and mothers. Okay, that's what the Talmud tells us. Very interesting, and we've talked about it in the past. This event happened at the beginning of the Second Temple era. And with the elimination of idolatry comes the cessation of prophecy. But 400 years later, a man by the name of Rabbi Ishmael ben Elisha, he was the high priest, and he had prophecy. What's going on? How does he have prophecy after prophecy had gone extinct? You want to read that story? It's found in the book of Brachos on page 7a. Very interesting. The context is important. The high priest had prophecy on Yom Kippur, in the Holy of Holies. Yes, there is a rule. There's a degradation of the nation. There's no longer prophecy outside of the Holy of Holies. But there's one place that the rules don't apply. There's one place that the elimination, the extinction of prophecy did not affect the Holy of Holies. And our parsha begins with a person entering that room, that realm. If this person was worthy, they would actually emerge as well, unscathed. If they were not worthy, they would die. And many, in fact, dozens of high priests did not make it out alive. They would tie a rope to their leg to pull them out because you can't walk in to retrieve the corpse. So how does our parsha begin? It begins by describing the loftiest level a human can achieve. And how does it end? Chapter 18, this is the first installment of our double parsha. God tells Moshe, speak to the children of Israel and tell them not to mimic, not to emulate the Egyptians. Don't act like they acted. Oh, and don't mimic, don't emulate the Canaanites. Follow God. Follow His law and His statutes. Guard His chukim, His laws. His mishpatim, His statutes. Do that and follow what God tells you to do. And don't copy the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Now, what does this mean? So Rashi tells us that the Egyptians, they were the worst of the worst. And the Canaanites, they were also the worst of the worst. The nations that our people were neighbors with, in Egypt, we're neighbors with the Egyptians, and we're about to enter the land of Canaan, we're neighbors with the Canaanites. These were the most spiritually corrupt and corrosive of all nations. And then the verse tells us, what did those nations do? And it begins to enumerate all the terrible things and crimes that they did. And particularly it focuses on the forbidden relationships that they violated. And it lists the mother and the stepmother and maternal uncles, maternal aunts and paternal aunts and sisters and half-sisters and all sorts of terrible incestuous relationships that were common in Egypt and in Canaan. Daughter-in-law, a married woman, a man sleeping with a man, a sister-in-law, bestiality in all its forms, women when they are menstruating. These are all the list of forbidden relationships. And then it pivots to Moloch. Moloch was a terrible idolatrous practice. They would take their firstborn son and throw him into the fire. Crazy. Absolute madness. The most unconscionable crimes. This was common amongst the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Don't copy them. Don't emulate them. Don't mimic them. Because if you do, I will do to you what I did to them. The land will expel you like it expelled the Canaanites. So we have a tale of two parshas here. The nation's told about the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, transcending to that other realm, that other dimension, entering the Holy of Holies, the absolute peak of human achievement. And it ends with a long litany of the worst, most vile, most repulsive, most despicable, most unconscionable, most depraved sins in the world. A tale of two parshas. Now, I want to say something parenthetically. And if you want to kind of space out for a little bit, that's totally fine, because I'll tell you when the parenthetical idea is over, and we'll get back to the central point, the central idea that we're trying to say in this week's Parsha podcast from the Torch Center in Houston, Texas. Parenthetically, it's interesting that this section at the end of Parshas Acharei, don't mimic the worst of the worst. Don't mimic the Egyptians and the Canaanites. And it lists the worst examples of depravity, of decadence, of immorality. And most of them are regarding forbidden relationships. All the people you can't marry, you cannot consort with. It's interesting that our sages, that the Torah tells us, that this area of a person's life and these particular sins, when a person goes off in this area, these are some of the worst sins possible. And doesn't it seem a bit puritanical, a bit prudish? Come on, our society would say they're consenting adults. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't bother me. Live and let live. And regarding these prohibitions, we have that preamble. Don't be like the Egyptians. They're the worst. Oh, and don't be like the Canaanites. They're also the worst. Now, we're told not to emulate the Egyptians and the Canaanites. Are we supposed to emulate other corrupt nations? What about the Romans or the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Persians, the Medes, the Greeks, the Byzantines? We've had a lot of neighbors that didn't quite live up to the highest standards of righteousness in our history. And the verse singles out, these are the worst of the worst. Don't copy them. Don't copy them, but I should copy others? So the commentaries tell us, no, these two are the worst because they're so corrupt in an area that is completely antithetical to who we are as a nation. Our nation, the essence of our nation, is to be very careful in matters, in sexual matters. And those nations, they were flagrant in these areas. And therefore, specifically, these are singled out. Don't be like them because, there's lots of sinful nations, but these are the worst because they're totally, utterly incompatible with you. They're the worst of the worst. You can't be near them. You have to be away from them. You're the opposite of them. Accordingly, this is the parenthetical point I want to convey. With maybe a little rant, a little classic diatribe. I'll tell you when we get out of the parenthetical point. According to this, our nation's central characteristic is righteousness and fidelity in these matters. In matters of procreation, in matters of intimacy. It's not a coincidence. The very first mitzvah in the Torah is to be fruitful and to multiply. It's the first mitzvah in the Torah, literally one of 613, chapter 1 of Genesis. And on Yom Kippur, by the way, what do we read? We read chapter 18 of Leviticus, our Parsha. There's something so central about this power that we have to bring human life into the world. Man is compared to, or was created in the image of God. We don't know what that means. But the verse is telling us there's some sort of overlap between us and God. What's that overlap? Well, God is a creator. He created the world, the universe, and the purpose of the creation of the world and the universe is the creation of humanity. We are in the image of God because we too can partner with him in creating humans. And we can get a foothold in eternity through this superpower that we have. And thus, it's so critical when we have this power to marshal it in a constructive rather than destructive way. This capacity is our ability to be most similar to God Almighty. It's our superpower. It's our superpower, and therefore, who we are as a nation is we guard this tenaciously, and we try to be as righteous as possible. That's who we are. That's what we stand for. Someone who fulfills this mitzvah, the first mitzvah of the Torah, properly, what are they doing? They're like bringing another soul into the world, a soul that's equal to the soul of Adam. Every person is obligated to say the world's created for me. It's partnering with God in Genesis. That's what this mitzvah is all about. And corrupting that superpower is unconscionable for the Jew. The Egyptians, the Canaanites, they focused on the carnal, hedonistic aspect of this. And that's the opposite of what our nation stands for. And periodically, I like to say this, and I wrote about this in my book. So if you've heard it before, forgive me. I'm a big proponent of encouraging people to have large families. Of course, not everyone's able. Of course, there's lots of exceptions, but society today, people having fewer and fewer children, just on average. If this is an area that we can become like God, or in some way, we could partner with God. There are 3 partners in every child, Father, Mother, and God, the Talmud tells us. This is the first mitzvah. Be fruitful and multiply. In this area, we are in the image of God. Here's the calculation. I heard it from my mom, she should live and be well, who she would quote it from her mom of blessed memory. If someone has a large family, now, I come from a fairly large family, one of 9 children. I'm the 6th of 9. And my wife is from a also fairly large family, 8 children. So we're not foreigners to large families. But suppose we go easy on someone. 7 children. It's large, but it's not gargantuan. Totally doable. Of course, easy for me to say, but just humor me. Suppose someone has 7 children. Each one of their 7 children has 7 children. Each one of their 49 grandchildren has 7 children. Each one of the 343 great-grandchildren has 7 children, and so on. Within about 200 years, they will have 1 million descendants. Now, of course, that is accelerated if they were to have 10 children, of course, or 8 or whatever. But most people underestimate the power of geometric exponential growth. So very staggeringly quickly, this ability, this superpower, can make you like a patriarch of a great nation. I tell my kids this all the time because I hope they'll just pass it on to their kids, be the top of the multi-level marketing. Anyhow, that's my little rant. Another rant. Or another pet peeve. Or a good pet peeve. So I heard that if a woman has 7 sons, did you ever hear this? 7 sons. Then when she gets to heaven, she goes straight to heaven with no stops anywhere else. Now, my mom, she's going to be well, she has 7 sons. So maybe I've heard it from her. I don't know. But I once researched it. Turns out there's no source, not in the Talmud, not in the Midrash, not in any of the literature about this idea. You have 7 sons to go straight to heaven. It's fiction. But today I realized this is like the best type of fiction Because I wonder, like, over the course of history, last, I don't know, few hundred years, how many people said, you know what, I have 6 sons, and if you have 7 sons, then you go straight to heaven. Let's push for one more. How many one mores were born because of this fiction? How much more has the world grown, has the nation grown because someone made up this fiction? So I'm sticking with it. Fiction or not, here's the encouragement to have lots of children if the Almighty blesses you with the ability to do that. One of the bleakest problems facing the world is a low fertility rate. Now, if the exponential math works in one direction, it actually works in the other direction as well. So we know that replacement rate for a population to be stable, no growth and no shrinkage, the replacement rate is 2.1, a birth rate of 2.1. Now, of course, you cannot have 0.1 children, but it means on average, right? On average. Some countries, very rich countries, they have like a 0.7 birth rate, which means every woman on average, over the course of her lifetime will have 0.7 children. Accordingly, if replacement rate is 2.1 and the average is 0.7, that means that every generation is a reduction of a third, or meaning of 2/3 reduction. It's only 1/3 the size of the previous generation. So after one generation, the population is 1/3 the size. After 2, it's 1/9 the size. After 3, it's 1/27 the size. Which means that after 3 generations, it's only like 3 to 4% of the original cohort. That's the size of the nation. Anyhow, this is the end of the parenthetical idea that we see. The Torah tells us that this area, this mitzvah that we have, that could be, God forbid, corrupted, this is who we stand for as a nation. And thus, specifically, the Egyptians and the Canaanites that are corrupt in these areas were told not to mimic them. Of course, we shouldn't mimic anyone who does bad things, but these in particular, we have to have a separate standalone verse. Don't copy them. Don't copy the Egyptians. Don't copy the Canaanites, because they really stand for the opposite of what you stand for. Okay, parenthetical idea over. Let's go back to the main idea. We have a double-header parsha, and the bookends are going into the Holy of Holies, and the most polar opposite idea, all the terrible sins of the Egyptians and the Canaanites that we are told not to do. That's the first parsha. Second parsha, Kedoshim. How does it start off? Kedoshim tiyu, be holy. Why should you be holy? Ki kadosh ani Hashem Elokeichem, because I, Hashem your God, am holy. We're told to be holy. Well, how holy? Holy in what way? Holy like God is holy. And the Midrash says, well, you can't be as holy as God, because God's holiness is beyond our holiness. So be holy, not quite as holy as God, but just one notch below that. So again, the parsha starts off very lofty. Be holy. How holy? Just one notch beneath God, so to speak. And how does it end? It ends with another litany of the worst, most vile, most unconscionable, most irrevocable, most unforgivable sins. The same sins that were told at the end of Parshas Acharei are repeated at the end of Parshas Kedoshim, this time with the punishments of those sins. Again, a tale of 2 parshas. Who is the parsha addressing? Who is the parsha talking to? Who is it for? Should some people only read the beginning and others only the end? How can you have in one parsha all the laws, all the specific laws of when and how and under what circumstances you enter the Holy of Holies? And, don't have relations with your mother. Don't do the awful sins enumerated at the end of the parsha. Now, some may say, well, our nation is kind of broad. We have a lot of diversity. There's high variance amongst our nation. But we know the whole Torah, every single word, every single verse, every single letter is speaking to us. It's speaking to every single member of this glorious nation. And the same person who was told, be holy, not quite as holy as God, just one notch lower, who is told how and under what circumstances to enter the Holy of Holies, is told to avoid incest and bestiality. There's a very powerful idea. How does someone become worthy of entering the Holy of Holies? What does it take? What's the career path for someone who wants to end up at the absolute pinnacle of spiritual holiness? So you may think, well, this is a person who lives a monastic life, who was holy from the womb, who never was tainted or influenced by any evil inclination, who was just a cut above from the beginning of their life. Our parsha tells us otherwise. Great people start off as everyone else. The same parsha is talking to the same person. People start off with different challenges, but everyone has challenges and everyone has struggles. And more specifically, not only does he who enters the Holy of Holies, not only does he who is told to be as holy as God, not quite one notch below, not only do they have struggles and challenges, more precisely, the way that they got there, the means to become great and holy, was specifically because they had to overcome, they had to tame their worst impulses. Specifically, humans, flesh and blood, capable of the worst sins in the world, capable of unimaginable evil. They're the only ones who can enter the Holy of Holies. They're the ones who need to be cautioned, become holy one notch less than God. The ones who were under the influence of the primordial serpent, who have the venom of the serpent coursing within them. Those people, they're the ones. And specifically because of those challenges and struggles, that's what enables them to be dynamic, to grow, to change, to overcome, and to achieve stratospheric heights. At the end of Genesis chapter 1, the verse tells us, God saw all that he did, v'hinei tov me'od, and behold, it was tov, it was good, me'od, very good. It was good, it was exceedingly good. Says the Midrash, tov ze yetzer tov. Good is a reference to the good inclination. Me'od, very good. Exceedingly good. Ze yetzer hara. That's the evil inclination. It's pulling us down. It's trying to get us to do terrible things that we're so embarrassed to even talk about. We have to get like an explicit rating on this Parsha podcast. It talks about these very uncomfortable, inappropriate subjects. The yetzer hara, that is very good because it enables you to use it as a foil to overcome it and to achieve things that you would have otherwise not been capable of achieving. Some people look at their impulses and their inclinations and the things they're struggling with, and they think, well, I'm capped. There's this glass ceiling that's preventing me from achieving greatness. But they have it backwards. It's precisely because of their evil inclination. The thing that's very good. It's precisely because of that they can achieve greatness. The challenges, every challenge, they're actually opportunities to build yourself, to advance up your ladder. Greatness is attainable. Stratospheric greatness is attainable, not despite your evil inclination, but precisely because of it. Every challenge that you have to overcome, as embarrassing as cringe-inducing as it may be, it's another stepping stone of your ladder to greatness. There is a consistency in our parshas. This is the story of achieving greatness. Every path to greatness. It starts off with a workout buddy, a spiritual sparring mate, a sparring mate of great talent, competence, and ability, a sparring mate whose ability matches your own. And if you just zoom in on this battle, you would say, well, looks like your sparring mate, your buddy, wants to pummel you. But it's good. It's very good. It's exceedingly good. Because really, it's designed for you to win and to overcome those challenges and to thereby achieve your full potential. Without the Acharei, you are capped. Thanks to it, thanks to our talented and precisely engineered sparring mate, we can achieve greatness that allows us to enter the Holy of Holies, that it can be reasonable to be told to us, be holy, godly holy, but not quite as holy as God, just one notch below. In that same parsha, we read about these unfathomable desires. A litany of crimes. This is the great one of our parsha. This is not a flawless wunderkind who never sinned, who never struggled, who never went astray, who never even desired something which was prohibited. Those people probably don't even exist. Even if they do, they're not candidates to enter the Holy of Holies. It's an idea from other religions that this person is just above it all. Oh, they wear a yarmulke. Holiness. I made a joke, okay? But it's probably true. We wear a yarmulke because the average Jew is as holy as the Pope, okay? At least. You call him his holy, a regular kid, 3 years old, just as holy. Even holier. We don't believe in that system, in abstaining from everything and just being like an angel. And history has shown us, we all know that it just doesn't work. That's not the path to achieve the greatness. The path is told in our parsha. It's overcoming those things. It's wrestling with those challenges. And that actually enables us to catapult higher and higher. Aaron felt like he was not a candidate to enter the sanctuary to do the sacrifices. Because he was a sinner after all. He made the golden calf. And when he looked at the altar and he saw the horns of the altar, those horns reminded him of the horns of the golden calf. Not for me. I'm a sinner. And Moshe says, enter, approach. For this you were chosen. You were chosen specifically because you had that torturous path. Because you may have done things that are not quite as admirable. That enabled you to enter the Holy of Holies. The Talmud tells us, in a place where the penitent stands, even someone who is completely righteous cannot stand. He who is greater than his friend has a greater Yetzer Hara than his friend. There is consistency, congruency. There is a continuum in our parsha. It's the story of achieving greatness. And that story is a story of transcending some of the worst impulses that we have operating within us. A powerful idea with a little bit of a parenthetical segue. Let's get to this week's dilemma. This is a dilemma that basically everyone who gets married encounters. You get married, it's wonderful, celebrations, and then you discover your spouse is so different than you. You married someone who's so thoroughly different, and you disagree on a great many things. And how you see the world and how they see the world completely different. It's like you're two different species. What to do now? It's frightening because you kind of committed yourself to a person and you discovered, well, maybe you were sold a bill of goods, or maybe you're not really compatible. Maybe you married wrong. Things have happened like that before. Maybe it's time to find someone else to try again. And it's a very serious dilemma. And our parsha and some of the discussion around some of the verses in our parsha, they show us a very different angle. Chapter 18, verse 6, it talks about a person not supposed to marry or consort with their relatives. And it lists all the relatives. And, of course, we learned this earlier. The desire for immorality, it was made blind. People don't desire their sisters and their mothers anymore. It's repulsive already for 2,400 years. That said, the Torah prohibits it. And then you read in the Ramban, he has a whole essay to try to understand why. And then he cites the Rambam. The Rambam says, well, because the Torah wants us to not be so focused on carnal activities, and therefore the women that you're going to be around with all the time, all the relatives, those are prohibited just as a means to not always be obsessed with carnal pleasure. That's what the Rambam writes, the Ramban cites it, and the Ramban does not like it. He says this is a very weak argument. He says if the Torah wants to ban a hedonistic life, how can it be that someone, at least by biblical standards, allowed to marry multiple women? You can live like a heathen. So if this was just about prohibiting a hedonistic way of life, that wouldn't be the reason. So what is the reason? And then he actually reinforces the question. He's like, there's no better spouse than your sister. This is what he writes, okay? Listen to his argument. Jacob married 2 sisters. But if siblings marry, it's actually a recipe for maybe a happy life, free of conflict. You never have to argue which family we're going to go to for Pesach. Yeah, the families and all the mores and the inside jokes, everyone, you have a common vernacular. But it's forbidden. You have to marry a stranger, an outsider. Why? So he says the Rambam's argument I don't like. He gives another answer. He says that there's a deep secret behind it. And then he says we don't really have a tradition, and really it's one of those mitzvahs that we just have to follow without knowing the reason. But the Maharal offers a reason. He says something very interesting, fundamental, maybe patently obvious, but definitely not obvious to everyone. He says that the definition of marriage, the Torah's definition of marriage, is that it's not good for a man to be alone. It's not good for Adam to be alone. And he needs a partner. He needs an Ezer Kenegdo, a helper who's opposite him. And then the verse tells us, therefore, this is in chapter 2 of Genesis, therefore a man shall depart, shall leave, shall abandon his father and his mother, v'davak be'ishto, and he shall cleave to his wife, v'hayu lebasar echad, to become one flesh. The Torah's definition of marriage is to leave something. You have to leave in order to cleave. You have to abandon something, your father and your mother, in order to forge something new, v'davak be'ishto, to cleave to your wife and become one flesh. Says the Maharal, when husband and wife are so similar, and there's no need to depart, to leave, there's no friction, there's no tension, there's no difficulty, then it's not a fulfillment of what the Torah envisions, what God envisions of a marriage. When it's very comfortable, it's the same family. There's no need to depart your father and mother. Then the greatness that the Torah wants us to achieve in Marriage is inaccessible. The Talmud even says, if you're not married, you'll never have Torah, you'll never have wisdom, you'll never have happiness. It's like a beautiful thing. It really unlocks all sorts of great potential that you had within you. And the only way to do it is to leave and to find a stranger. And when you have a stranger, they're very different. And you have to learn to live with them and respect each other and love each other and understand each other and care for each other. And that's the process of becoming a greater person. You're breaking out of your little selfish cocoon and becoming a greater person. It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be cloistered up in his own world. Marriage is breaking out of those shackles. And thus when there's tension and you have to leave something, you have to forfeit something, you have to abandon something, that's actually a feature, not a bug. And says the Maharal, that's why we're forbidden to marry relatives, because the greatness envisioned by the Torah, designed by God, the greatness that marriage is supposed to bring a person to, it will not happen unless there is a departure, unless there's some tension, there's forfeiting of something. And the context of this is very interesting. Now, most of the listeners, not the ones who are here at torchzoom.com, Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Central, but the listeners, most of them have dropped off. They listen for 20 minutes, 40 minutes. We're already beyond that. So all the stragglers they've already moved on to other things. So I can tell you this secret. The Maharal says that the context of this idea is Moshe. Who did Moshe marry? So Moshe married Zipporah. We read the story. Well, who's Zipporah? She's the daughter of Jethro. Well, who's Jethro? Jethro was a Midianite. He's a priest of Midian. And that's who Moshe married. Wait, couldn't we find a nice Jewish girl from maybe one of the tribes, maybe, who Moshe can marry? What's the deep secret behind the fact that Moshe has to go to maybe a different nation, and she'd converted, as we know, but he has to go to a different nation, like a total outsider, and that's who he marries? It cannot be, it's just by chance. And the Maharal explains, Moshe, his essence, was the same essence as the entire nation. He incorporated within himself all 600,000 souls of Israel. And thus he was able to intimately identify and connect with every soul amongst the nation. He was able to teach Torah to every soul. There was no one within our nation that was a stranger to him. There was no one that he would have to depart from himself to cleave to. And therefore he had to search elsewhere. The only way that Moshe could have garnered the transformative benefit of marriage is if he looked elsewhere. He's so thoroughly identified with the Jews, with all 600,000. He had to kind of marry out, so to speak. That's what the Maharal says. And I, if I may add something. Moshe's successor is Joshua. Who did Joshua marry? The Torah does not tell us. However, we learn in the sources that Joshua married Rachav. I think it's pronounced Rahab. Who's that? Well, she's a prostitute. The prostitute of Jericho. Well, she converted, and Joshua married her. What? We could have found a nice Jewish girl for Joshua to marry? Same idea, perhaps, that he was such a consummate leader in the mold of Moshe. He's so thoroughly identified with the rest of his kinmen. There's no way they could have achieved the benefits and the bliss and the transformation of marriage unless he went to a stranger outside the nation. That would be the way to depart from who he was. Marriage is very powerful, very beautiful, very constructive. And that's specifically because you're different. Now, of course, your goals and your values and your priorities in life have to be aligned. But on a deep conceptual level, the definition of marriage is to depart. Depart so that you can cleave. Why do so many marriages fail? Now, we define a failed marriage Of course, if it ends in divorce, hard to say that's not a failed marriage. But even if two people are still married, filing jointly, that's not necessarily a marriage that's a success. It could be two people living different lives. And they stay together, for the kids or for tax purposes or for convenience. The reason why it's hard is because the nature of marriage, for it to succeed, is to have that tension and that challenge and that encounter, that clash, that fusion with an opposite. And to come together and to merge together and to fuse together and become one flesh. A man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife and become one flesh. It's change. Change is painful. Change is the product of tension. Tension is the opportunity. Most people don't know this. And if they do know it, they don't want it. It's too hard. And that's why marriages fail. But of course, when someone has that dilemma, it can be very upsetting. And Rabbi Berkowitz says that every yeshiva student who gets married during the first year of marriage, he's positive he married the wrong one. And that's a pretty big dilemma. And when someone has that dilemma, you say, go listen to Acharei Kedoshim podcast on the Parsha podcast at the end, after everyone tuned out. That's the resolution to the dilemma. We should all have happy lives and happy marriages, and please God, large families, and we should merit to see the Messiah and the high priest emerging from the Holy of Holies. I appreciate your attention and your listenership and your friendship. This is the Parsha Podcast. My name is Yaakov Wolbe, spelled Wolbe. If you want to send me an email, rabbywolbe@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day. Have a splendid, super duper rest of your week. And an elevated, transformative, quiescent Shabbos are coming. Please God, with the help of the Almighty, we will once again gather together for another installment of the Parsha Podcast next week. The email address is rabbywolbe@gmail.com.